Well, hello and a very warm welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of BA Fringe, the live stream show that celebrates ideas at the edges of business analysis, whether that's new techniques, new ideas, or perhaps older ideas that we should bring back into the core of our practice. Now, this is actually also the final episode of Season 1. You can think of this as the season finale, if you like, but fear not, because we've actually got another 6 episodes already in the planning for Season 2. We won't be skipping a beat. They will be starting again in January. So do let us know. What do you want to know? What do you want to hear about in Season 2? Maybe you've got an idea that you want to present about and you want to be a guest on BA Fringe. Well, all you need to do is get in touch. You can reply to any of the emails, or get in touch by Twitter, LinkedIn, or whatever. Now, as ever, we are live on both Zoom and YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, that's probably because you didn't get in early enough to get one of the seats in the Zoom room. Now, the Zoom room, I always think, is the best place to be because there's the additional opportunities of networking. So if you are there in the Zoom room, be sure to type in the chat where you're from, start chatting to each other and exchanging ideas and just generally sort of having a chat about what's going on in the show, really. Whether you're in Zoom or whether you're not, do remember this is always a really very social event. So do get active on social media. The hashtag is BA Fringe. That's hashtag BA Fringe. So do share beyond the beyond the boundaries of the event itself. And what an eclectic but important set of topics we have for you today, viewer. We're going to be talking about job seeking tips, hitting the ground running on new projects or in new roles, working under pressure. I suspect we've all worked under pressure from time to time, and facilitating virtually and resolving conflict virtually, something I'm sure is relevant for all of us. Now, this is live, which means anything could happen. You may have noticed a tiny little technical issue at the beginning of the show already. If you didn't, if you blinked, you probably missed it, but that proves it's live. And I have to tell you, viewer, that about 2 hours ago, one of the 4 machines, the 4 laptops that's in the main studio production laptops, decided to fail in what I can only describe as a quite dramatic and spectacular way. But all I can say is non-functional requirements and disaster recovery planning and business continuity really did pay off, because within 20 minutes, me and my producer Matt had it swapped out and we were ready to go live on schedule. However, if it looks like my heart is racing a little bit more than usual, that will be why. What could be better for the season finale than a bit of extra jeopardy and a little bit of extra adrenaline? Now, do remember, because this show is live, you can have your own shout outs read out. All you need to do is navigate your browser towards bafringe.live. That is bafringe.live. Perhaps there's a colleague who's helped you out that you want to celebrate. Maybe you're celebrating something. Maybe you just want to tell us about a particular topic that you've enjoyed. Quick form, all you need to do, fill it out, and we'll read as many shout outs as we can later in the episode. I'd also like to give a big shout out myself to the sponsor of this episode. We have a new sponsor for this episode, and as you know, we only ever have the sort of big hitters, the important sponsors here on BA Fringe, and we have Skore sponsoring this episode. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'd not come across Skore as a company until a few months ago, but they do some really cool process analysis, process modeling, and process management software. So do check it out. And actually, we've got a 5-user license for 3 months to give away a little bit later in the show. So stay tuned for that. However, let's move on to our first live guest. Now, I suspect a number of people viewing this show will be thinking about job seeking. whether you have perhaps unfortunately lost your job through redundancy, or maybe you're just looking to make a career transition, or perhaps you're looking to become a BA for the first time. It's certainly a hard market at the moment. Now, I've known Sarah Fitton for, well, quite a long time now. We first we sort of worked together as volunteers for the International Institute of Business Analysis. We were both on the UK board. And Sarah's held a number of very senior leadership and BA roles, and is now a career coach and business analyst mentor for Coach Me to Success. So Sarah, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Adrian. It's nice to be here.
Fantastic. So Sarah, the first question I have on my mind is, I know certainly when I first met you, you were in a leadership role in a sort of business analysis capacity. And I know you've now transitioned into coaching and helping others. And I'm just curious, what was the reason you made that transition?
There's a number of things. I think, having been in leadership roles for quite a while, the bits that I was really enjoying about that was developing the teams. And that obviously comes with a lot of coaching and mentoring. Alongside of that, obviously, when you're running a large team, then you have to hire people. So I must have, goodness, done hundreds of interviews over the years, seen thousands of CVs, so got a really good understanding of what's needed and what people are looking for. And I've been through a couple of redundancies. I've had a bit of a career change, and last year decided to train as a career counsellor. And obviously, sadly, I suppose, it's been a year where the need for that sort of support has been higher than I've seen for a very long time. So that's what's prompted it, really. After my last contract ended this year, I decided it was time to support others.
Absolutely, and I mean, thousands of CVs. That's hundreds of interviews, thousands of CVs. That's quite a perspective to have on that, Sarah. And I mean, I'm sure there will certainly be people listening who are looking to make a career transition, or maybe some people who have been affected by redundancy, and there might even be people who have perhaps been, working in the same role for a period of time, and are now looking to make that next leap. So from your experience of seeing like scores and scores of CVs, how would you say, how can people stand out in what is quite a difficult job market?
So I think the first thing is being really clear on what you have to offer. Think about what you've achieved throughout your career, what you want to be known for, what your value proposition is, what pain points it is that you want to be solving, and make sure that you've got a knockout CV, basically, in a LinkedIn profile to match. And it's not enough to have a standard CV that you just farm out willy-nilly to whoever. You need to make sure that for every role you're going for, that you're tailoring your application to give yourself the best chance.
Yeah, that's interesting. And because I know, like, the whole sort of format of a CV is quite it's quite a contentious debate on LinkedIn, or certainly I see that. And do you think there is there such thing as like a standard best practice for a CV? Like how long should a CV be? Or is it the classic BA answer, it depends?
Well, I suppose you can always use the BA standard answer, it depends. But typically you'll see people recommending 2 pages for your CV, 3 at a push. And I think a lot of people struggle with that initially, because they think, well, I've had a sort of 10, 15, 20, 25-year career. How do I possibly get all of that on 2 sides of A4? You've got to remember that your CV is essentially, it's a marketing tool for you. And it's not a historical document. It's to give people enough information about what you have to offer and what you're about for them to think, I want some of that, I want to hear more, I want to bring them in for interview. And I think that if you're struggling to get your 4 or 5 page CV down to 2 pages, that would be my top tip. Just think of what's absolutely relevant and what your best bits are, and cut everything else out.
Yeah, that editing, it's something I've found in my career generally, actually, is that less is more. That actually, and it's sort of like writing, isn't it? Writing's hard, but editing is harder. And I think that's even more true on a CV, because, quite naturally we want to tell that story, but editing it down.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got a really great achievement, but it doesn't relate to the role that you're applying for, then it doesn't take away your achievement not to put it on the CV. You've still achieved it. But if it's not going to wow somebody, that you want to wow for this particular role you're going for, then be brutal, I'd say.
Yeah.
Be brutal and leave it out.
Yeah, be brutal, leave it out. And as you said, Sarah, there, having that really specific, make it as easy as possible for the hiring manager to say yes to interview. So tailoring it to that role. So I know that one thing I find quite a lot is that I speak to people who are perhaps newer to the BA role. And one of the challenges they have is getting their first role, because even some supposedly sort of junior, in inverted commas, BA roles ask for like 2 or 3 or 4 years experience.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you've got any tips for someone looking to get their first role who's caught by that, no experience means no job cycle.
And I think a lot of it is again about how you sell yourself. So we talked about being clear on what it is that you have to offer. So look at what you've done in your career. You might have implemented a new process that saves some money. You might have run a great workshop. You might have pitched an idea to your manager to sell something and told him what the benefits are going to be and got approval for it. So there already you've got running workshops, you've got process analysis, you've got business case development. So I think understand the sort of language that's typically used and the type of skills that BAs need, and look at what you've got in your toolkit already, which actually plays to those skills and those strengths, and just rebadge it in the right sort of words. That would be the first thing I'd say. I think get clarity on exactly what the role is. A BA, make sure you've got a good basic understanding. I spoke to somebody not so long ago who was applying for BA roles, but some of the key things, like asking what the difference was between a functional and non-functional requirement, for example, they couldn't articulate that. So be aware of what those basics are and learn them so that you sound credible when you're applying for something. So there's some of the basics. I think getting experience where you can, finding a mentor if possible, making it known where you're working already that this is something that you'd like to do, and see if people can provide you some shadowing opportunities or opportunities to do a small piece of work and partner with somebody more senior. And then there's groups out there, such as the Young Business Analysts on LinkedIn. It's a relatively new group, and they're helping young BAs. It's run by young BAs for young BAs to help them get into the profession. You've got the IS apprenticeship that was for business analysis that was developed 3 years ago. So there's so much more out there, I think, to support people trying to break through than there was maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. And I mean, I think the Young BA sort of initiative is a fantastic one. And if anyone is interested, I mean, if you search LinkedIn, there's a Young BA group, lots of stuff going on in there. And also, of course, IIBA, so the International Institute for Business Analysis, the UK chapter, you and I know quite a lot about, but there are chapters across the world so people can connect and maybe look at getting, entry-level certification to get that common lingo as well, type of thing. So with the reality that there are often lots of people applying for, say, the same BA role, any tips for really standing out with the application?
So a must-have is the tailoring. I mean, whilst that might have helped you stand out in the past, that's probably just going to get you an in now, because there's such fierce competition. So you cannot afford to have a CV that doesn't sell you for a particular role. That would be the first thing. Make sure that you've got a LinkedIn profile that's up to date. If you can, get on LinkedIn. So I think the stats are that only 1% of the multi-million users on the platform actually post.
Wow,
so if
really?
You're one of the, if you're one of that number and you're out there and you're posting, then that increases your opportunity for being seen. So that would be a top tip from me. And finally, I suppose, if you're applying through the many systems that there are out there at the moment, are relatively faceless, check if a vacancy is advertised actually on the careers website for the company that you're applying to, rather than using a third party, and find out who is doing the hiring and who the recruitment contact is. And even with recruitment agencies, so many of them say they rarely get calls. I know that the market's tough at the moment and some people call and don't get a response, but the good agencies and the good internal recruiters, if you ring and have a conversation and show your interest, then already you're one step ahead of everybody else. And when those CVs come in, they'll look out for your application.
Yeah, it's, I suppose, differentiating between like just another number, just another CV, to a voice at the end of the phone, a person who's actually taken that impetus to really show the interest. So, well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. A lot for us to be thinking about there, about tailoring and really sort of, you know, getting to know the job and the person advertising it. So I am certain that people will want to stay in touch with you. How's the best way for people to follow you and stay in touch, Sarah?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I post on there quite regularly with job tips, or if you want to reach out to me directly, then you can reach me on sarah.fitton@coachmetosuccess.co.uk.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Sarah. And we'll pop those details on the email that goes out to people after the show as well, so they can contact you there. So fantastic. Well, thanks, Sarah. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. And you.
Cheers.
Bye, Adrian.
So I think a lot for us to take away there, and I think some really practical tips there from Sarah about tailoring CVs, really thinking about LinkedIn as well. And can you believe only 1% of people post on LinkedIn? So what a really great practical way to get noticed without really taking too much effort. So do keep in mind that you can, you know, because we are live, you can have a shout out read out. I can see we've got shout outs coming in as we speak. We will read some of those out a little bit later, but as a reminder, if you would like a shout out, it is bafringe.live. Just navigate your browser to bafringe.live and you can really celebrate anything you like. You could celebrate, you know, a colleague being promoted, or, you know, something you're taking away from the session today, or anything really. So get your thinking cap on there. I'd also, before we move on to the next segment, like to tell you about a competition that you can enter. So how would you like to win a 5-user license for 3 months for Skore's process modeling, process management and process analysis tool? How cool would it be if you could go into work and say, look, we're not physically going to work probably these days, but, you know, on a Zoom call or whatever, and say, look, hey, we've got a 5-user license for this cool tool. You know, and what better timing for a cloud-based tool than when we're all distributed? Well, the good news is you have that opportunity. One lucky winner will indeed win that. All you need to do is get even more active on social media than you already are. And as Sarah's mentioned, there's good reason to do that anyway. To be in with a chance of winning, all you need to do is simply share your biggest takeaway on LinkedIn using the hashtag BAFringe. That is hashtag BAFringe, and either tag or mention Skore. And that will be one entry into the competition. We will choose one lucky winner who we will contact via social media, and then we'll put you in touch with the folks at Skore if you're the lucky winner to get your prize. So you could share your biggest takeaway. Maybe you want to take a photo of you watching the show and share that on LinkedIn as well. Entirely up to you. Be as creative as you like. So that takes us to our next segment. Have you ever thought about what hitting the ground running actually means? It's a phrase we use quite a lot, isn't it? You talk about going onto a project and hitting the ground running, or starting a new role and hitting the ground running. But what does it mean, and how can we actually achieve it? Well, I'm really pleased to say that Jason Thompson, who is BA consultant at 11 Dots Limited, has agreed to give us a bit of context about what this means. So Jason, over to you. Okay.
Hi. One of the interesting things I've seen on job boards when I'm in between contracts looking for my next role is the line, must be able to hit the ground running. Now, I find the concept of hitting the ground running quite amusing. In my head, I imagine this idea of paratroopers jumping out of a plane onto enemy territory and storming towards a castle or some kind of objective. But when I looked up the meaning of the term hit the ground running, one interesting definition was to start an activity with energy and enthusiasm, working effectively from the beginning. And that kind of sums up what I kind of understand practically as hitting the ground running from the perspective of a BA starting on a new project. So typically, you know, my experience as a contractor about 6 or 7 years, normally I've got into contracts where there's been fairly good setup of a project. So it's been clear who the sponsor is, the objective, the scope of the project is clear. There's more or less a good definition of roles and responsibilities. So I'd call that kind of solid ground. But you can have, that's not always the case. There was one project that I worked on, which I would call Project Quagmire, which felt like jumping out of a parachute and landing in ground, and which sunk beneath your feet, and so you ended up feeling like you were knee deep in mud. And that's quite hard to, once you've hit that, it's quite hard to be running. And in this project, what I found after a period of time working on it, that it had 4 different project managers, and there were 2 BAs who worked on the project and tried to shape and make sense of it. I come in, and in a month, I've created a roadmap of deliverables. I've identified what the priorities should be for the phase 1 of the project. I've started doing some process models, some target operating models, and kind of, you know, I thought I was hitting the ground running. However, unbeknownst to me, the person that oversaw, the director that provided oversight to the project team, had a very different perspective on what the project I was working on should be about. Yet he wasn't a stakeholder we identified should be that interested in the project. And that's where the problem actually started, because obviously he was my project manager's boss, and he put pressure on my project manager that this project should be taken into a different direction. So as part of that, I was required to do lots and lots of work on activities which were essentially out of scope of the project. That kind of goes against my DNA and my raison d'etre for being a BA, to be honest. Working on out of scope stuff seems very ineffective for me. And I kind of lost my mojo and enthusiasm for this project, having seen what was going on. Now, over a period of time, I think the lesson I took away from that experience, basically working in a project where the people delivering the project were trying to drive the agenda, was that there were kind of 4 things. One, the first thing was recognize when you're in a quagmire of a project, okay? When you've got no scope, where you've got stakeholders who are pulling in completely opposite directions, where there's some dispute over who the actual project sponsor should be, that is shaky ground, and that ground needs to be firmed up before you can only start making progress on it. 2, let other people know when you think the project is a bit of a quagmire and why. Don't just say the project is a pile of poo-poo. That's not going to be very helpful. What you need to do is give them evidence as to why the project is not going to make the kind of progress that it can do, because there's no solid ground for us to make progress because we're stuck in a quagmire. Number 3, make sure you do your stakeholder analysis. Okay, that situation primarily occurred because we hadn't really identified that our own boss was a key stakeholder. He had completely different ideas about where the project should be going. And lastly, I suppose the bonus one was make sure you have in your organization as a contractor, try and build good and positive relationship with your colleagues. So I had good and positive relationship with my colleagues, because that's really what's going to help you get through the difficult times on a project. The fact you can show up to work and there are people actually that are happy to see you, or you're happy to see them and you want to engage with them, That's going to help you understand a lot more about the culture of the organization. So then you can start to think about how you would adapt or maybe reframe what you see as, what you see you can actually get out for a project while working on a particular initiative. So those are my 4 tips. Those are my 4 tips, my 10 cents worth, as if you want to call it. Try to avoid getting into quagmires if you can, and if you find yourself in a quagmire, try and help the organization build their way out of it. Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I thought that was a really, really interesting summation of what of a phrase we use all the time, but have never really deconstructed. And I think what really struck me about what Jason was saying there was particularly at the beginning when he was saying it was about starting with, with enthusiasm and energy and effectiveness. And I love that whole expression about a quagmire, like making sure we're not in a project quagmire. I think we've all worked in project quagmire, haven't we? But actually, you can't hit the ground running if the ground is moving beneath you. I mean, the metaphor works on so many levels, really, doesn't it? And I love that idea of really needing to engage stakeholders. And this is something I know we probably instinctively know, but I find it really, really helps to hear it and reinforce it. So, Jason, thank you very much for a really, really interesting insight there. So I've mentioned a few times, of course, that you can have shout outs read out by navigating over to bafringe.live, which is exactly what these next couple of people did. So first of all, we have Joe in Liverpool. Now, Joe says, shout out to me. So shout out to Joe, as I had my first BA interview last week and my first BA job offer today. So congratulations to Joe. I mean, that is just awesome to have a first interview and a first job. Obviously, you really nailed it with the CV and the whole process. You should come on here and tell us how you did it, because people will be interested in that story. So massive shout out and kudos to Joe in Liverpool there. The next one, again, if you've watched this show, you'll know sometimes we have shout outs and I'm never really sure whether it's someone trolling me or not, but I tend to read them out anyway, because I've got a bit of a sense of humour. And also it's the last show of the season. So this is from Peter, allegedly Peter. And Peter says, love BA Fringe. Thanks to you and the team for putting them on. Adrian, have you ever considered a job on shopping TV? You'd be awesome at it. I'm pleased to say, Peter, that I have actually considered that, but I don't think it would ever happen. But if anyone's watching that has any connection to shopping TV, well, who knows? Put me in touch. I'm sure I could flog a few things on QVC. Sorry. Anyway, on a more serious note, do remember also to keep tweeting. Use the BA Fringe hashtag, and don't forget that competition, because you can, by being even more active on social media, you can win a free, or have the opportunity of winning a free 5-user license for Skore's really cool business process modeling, analysis and management package. So 3-month license to that. All you need to do is get active on LinkedIn, use the BA Fringe hashtag, and tag our friends at Skore to enter that competition. And every update counts as one entry. So get LinkedIning, if that is a word. Anyway, I'm sorry, Peter, sending that shout out in has absolutely made my day for reasons which I'll explain to you another time. So that moves us on to our next live guest. Now, I first met or first saw Eleanor Stowe speak at the BA Conference Europe 2019, and I was blown over by the topic that she talked about, and just by her absolute enthusiasm for business analysis and just the way that she presented such an important topic. Now, I'm sure that many of us are working under pressure at the moment, not least because we are working in a very difficult, often quite a difficult and distributed environment. So Elle's going to talk to us about the tricky but important topic of managing that pressure and perhaps dealing with stress and anxiety as well. So Elle, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Adrian. Thanks so much for inviting me. What a lovely introduction to get. I'm quite touched.
Well, no, I can still remember because I thought you gave such a frank and open and honest discussion that I actually think what you did was you almost created a space for BAs to talk about this stuff. And I think that's so important for so many reasons, and particularly given how 2020 seems to have gone for many of us. So Elle, I mean, working under pressure, all of these sorts of ideas, such an important topic. And I wondered why this is a topic that you're so enthusiastic about yourself.
So if I'm perfectly honest, so when I first got interested in mental health, I was actually a teenager. It's quite a long time ago now, and I didn't have a very pleasant upbringing. So I got into mental health purely for myself and for kind of getting me through that period in my life. And it's something that over the years, I think has been really important for me personally. It was certainly one of my bigger barriers earlier on in life. And so it's something that I've been very interested in from that perspective. It made a huge difference with singing, as many people, or if anybody on here is listening and knows me a bit, they might know that I've used to be a singer, and that's obviously a very stressful job, really. Very, very stressful thing to be doing. So I did a lot of work on that, on about being able to be calm in performance situations. And then a couple of years ago, even after having done all of this reading, all of this kind of learning about the mental health world, I realized 2 years ago, I think it was, that I also kind of had anxiety as well, which was just kind of sitting in the background, very, very subtle. I didn't even realize it was there until I actually stopped to think about it one day. And that had been there for a really long time as well. So it's kind of something, the reason why I've talked about it so much is that, you know, I'd done all of this research, or not kind of proactive research, but just kind of a lot of reading anyway on this kind of topic, and yet it still shocked me that I was undergoing or suffering with anxiety. And I thought, you know what, if it's happening to me, it's likely going to be happening to other people. And I guess I'm just not too worried about talking about it with people for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, which I think is great, because I think it's becoming less of a taboo, but there's still that sort of slight taboo about talking about it, like it's, you know, like it's some form of, you know, almost perceived as a weakness of character by some, but whereas it really isn't or shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly as well, sort of as we're working in projects and stuff, you see people struggling, and isn't it nice to be able to kind of put a name to it and be like, oh, that person is struggling because they might have anxiety, I don't know. So maybe I need to be a bit more careful with that person and look after them a bit better. And you know, it's just so prolific. So many people have stress or have anxiety at any given point, so we need to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean, just a bit of a segue, but I remember one thing I was always really thankful for was there's a couple of people I work quite closely with, and I've worked with on voluntary and all sorts of in different contexts other than just work, and they're the sort of person that spot patterns. Like I'll get an email saying, you sent an email at this time in the morning and this time at evening. Are you okay? You know, and sometimes it's that checking in, isn't it, to say, look, you know, have you drifted off into this pattern again, because you know that didn't work well for you last time, type of thing. So with that in mind, I suspect we're all working under pressure, or certainly, you know, it's quite likely that people are working under pressure right now. What can we do to ensure that, like, we as practitioners, but also our colleagues, are as happy and healthy as we can be in these sort of, I know it's a cliche, but unprecedented times?
Yeah, for sure. I think, so for me personally, I find it very important to limit my work in progress, not just in work though, it's also kind of in my personal life as well. And I think, so firstly, I first started applying it to work. It's obviously a principle that a lot of us try to employ in our works, but it's really easy to say, oh, I'm not doing too much at work. And then outside of work, you might set yourself 5 different goals, say, to complete by the end of the year. So exactly. And you just end up spreading yourself very thin. I think it can be very difficult to actually take a break, because you kind of feel like you've always got if you're not working on one thing, you should be working on the next thing and the other thing that you've got lined up as well. So for me, I have to be quite disciplined with myself, and just tell myself it's not necessarily one thing at a time, but it's definitely look at what's currently in flight for me, whether personal or professional, and saying, is that the biggest thing right now? Is it draining me? Is it going to, am I accountable to other people for it? Can I just drop it for now and pick it up in a couple of weeks' time when I know things will be a bit quieter? So it's just a lot of little things like that can be really helpful for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there is that sort of sometimes less is more, limit the work in progress. Funnily enough, I've been listening to an audiobook, and it was one of those audiobooks that I pretty much listened to in about 3 or 4 sittings. It's by Matt Haig, and it's called Life in a Nervous, I've forgotten the title, Life in a Nervous World, or something like that. But the author's Matt Haig, H-A-I-G, and he talked about having a life edit. And he was saying that, we sort of, we accumulate so much clutter, and that clutter can kind of drag you down. And I sort of, that really resonated with me, but that clutter can be all those unfinished projects that sort of sit there goading you, can't they, in a way? So
yeah, absolutely. There's a book that talks about that as well, called Essentialism by Greg McSomething. Can't remember. But I think it's called something like Essentialism, the Art of Doing Less. And I was listening to this as an audiobook right at the beginning of lockdown, and I was thinking, these are just techniques I do in business analysis and in project management, and they've just applied it as helping yourself, really. It's like, well, why am I not doing that? Why am I not limiting my work in progress? Why am I not putting project plans around my projects? They're good techniques. They've become part of our vocabulary for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. It's applying our own discipline onto our analysis, onto our daily lives, and making sure we don't take on too much. So I suppose another thing that I think human beings generally struggle with is dealing with change. And we work in change, whether people listening in are business analysts, project managers, process analysts. We're often involved in implementing of change, but that doesn't mean it's actually any easier dealing with change ourselves when change hits us. And there's been a lot of change this year for many of us. Do you have any tips on like dealing with and coming to terms with changes, whether that's in work or in life or in any context, really?
Sure. I think for me this year, the biggest takeaway has been about being kind to myself and being patient with myself. I think we can get really, really judgy with ourselves about how we're dealing with any given situation. And for instance, if we look at, say, the 2 lockdowns that we've had in the UK, the first one and the second one for me were really different experience. And I think it's really easy to say, oh, they're both the same. They're both locked down. You should be able to do exactly the same as you can in one as you can in the other. But actually, we're human beings. We're not robots. We can't just switch on and off and do all the thing, do a massive task list all the time. So I think being able to just kind of take a step back and breathe and like I say, be patient with yourself. Remember, you're a human being and not a robot.
Yeah. I think that's really, really good advice, and it's hard advice, isn't it? Because I think sometimes we put more pressure on ourselves than we ever would on our teammates. There's sort of this relentless struggle to be doing all of the time, and almost sometimes a bit of guilt if we're not doing. And in some organisations, I've noticed there's almost a bit of a culture of sort of doing. And so maybe there's something about breaking that culture of doing, that it's, you know, it's okay to stare out of a window and think. You know, the world needs more thinking, surely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think particularly if you're not used to, I've definitely suffered from working from home. It's not where I feel particularly comfortable. And I think particularly working from home, you almost feel like you're being, if you're away from the computer for any time, like you're not in work anymore. Whereas you wouldn't feel like that if you're in the office.
Yeah.
So again, just kind of having to ground myself again and think again of what, you know, relaxing and into the situation and just being patient with myself.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, that sort of patience and being a bit forgiving of ourselves as we would be with others.
Absolutely.
So Elle, I mean, just before we go, I mean, any other top tips or takeaways for how we can look after ourselves and look after others, you know, at this or any other time?
So I think looking after others, I think it's definitely worth bearing in mind that this time of year is going to be really difficult for a lot of people. Personally, I found that even just organising Christmas has been like, it took us several weeks just to do that, and we've had a much better time than a lot of people out there during this year. So I think being super patient with other people as well, and being really aware that you don't know what's going on in their lives, and so yeah, just being really kind to other people. In terms of looking after yourself, I'd say if you're really struggling, firstly, reach out to other people, and there's loads of cool centres as well, and cool lines like Samaritans, etc. So even if you don't feel comfortable talking with people in your sphere, get in touch with them. And then also look after your physical needs as well. It's a bit easier, I find, than looking after my mental needs sometimes, to just think about, am I eating the right food today? Am I going out and having a walk and getting some sunlight in?
Yeah, I don't know if you find this out, but I find the two are sort of a bit symbiotic in that actually sometimes I find that if when my mental health is worse, I let my physical health suffer, which then means that I feel worse and you feel guilty. So it becomes a bit of a doom loop, doesn't it? They sort of play onto each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And our physical and our mental health it's actually really entwined. If you talk to any like proper practitioner, they will tell you that you know, it's all part of the same body. You know, your feelings are a part of your body, they're a part of your brain chemistry. So in order to look after one, you have to look after the other. So I think, yeah, it's so much, for me anyway, it's easier for me to just focus on physical needs, you know, food, exercise, rest, essentially, rather than to try and sort out the mess that might be in my head at any given time. Yeah.
And it's interesting you say walking, because I've always found one of the best things for clearing my head is just to get out in nature. So I live quite near the sea, so it's great to just go and stare out at the sea for a bit and just let the, you know, metaphorically let the you know, let the sea in, sort of type of thing. But well, Elle, thank you so much for some really sort of thought-provoking ideas on a very, very pertinent and very, very timely topic there. I'm absolutely certain people will want to follow you, will want to stay in touch. How's the best way for people to connect with you?
So I'm on Twitter. I think I'm the Singing BA on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I think I'm just the one Eleanor Stowe on LinkedIn, so I should be pretty easy to find. I've got a website, eleanorstowe.com. Yeah, that's about it, really.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure people will follow you, and what we'll do, we'll put those details and the LinkedIn link in the email that goes out to people after as well, so they can connect with you as well. So Elle, thanks so much for taking time. It was really great to speak to you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Adrian.
Thanks. See you soon. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
So I think there were some really, really interesting ideas to think about there. And I really, really liked what Elle said about being kinder to ourselves, but also perhaps appreciating that we don't know what's going on in other people's lives, particularly at the moment where we're not all in one place. So if we sort of act with kindness kindness by default, and assume the best of intentions, then, you know, perhaps we'll have a better outcome all round. Okay, so just before we move on to our next segment, we have lots of shout outs coming in. Now, I haven't had time to write them up on my cue card, so I'm going to have to grab my tablet PC to read a few of them out. So, here we go. So we have Christy, who says, any chance of Adrian donning a festive hat before the end of the show, please and thank you. I think that'll be a no, Christy, unless the Black Metric Studios costume department can get one in the next few minutes, which seems somewhat unlikely. Here's hoping they can't. Stuart says, a great show as always. Big thanks to Christy for being so vocal and being a great advocate for the forum. So we've got Stuart, big shout out to Christy there. So indeed, big shout out to Christy, who was a previous guest on BA Fringe, of course. So then we have Tina. Tina says, shout out to Sarah Fitton. I've only known Sarah for a short time, where we also regularly attend the John Show Live, a contractor on LinkedIn networking group for those seeking new roles, which I would also recommend. So I'll just read that out again. That's the John, Jon, Show Live, hashtag. Sarah is very approachable, professional, and is a great coach and worth connecting with on LinkedIn. Well, Tina, I would absolutely echo your point there. Having in a voluntary capacity worked with Sarah, I would say she's an absolutely fantastic person to know. And if you ever get the chance to work with her, I wouldn't hesitate to do that. So do, of course, keep those shout outs coming in. We'll cover as many as we can. You just need to go to bafringe.live. That is bafringe.live. If we don't read your shout out on this show, we will endeavour to read it out on a future show. Okay, so that brings us neatly on to our next segment. I suspect many of us are facilitating virtually at the moment. Now, let's face it, facilitating is difficult at the best of times. Resolving conflict is difficult at the best of times, but it's probably even more difficult, or it takes more preparation and conscious effort in a virtual world. So I'd like to introduce Janice McNamara, who's a facilitator and mentor. Now, Janice very kindly agreed to put together a pre-recorded segment for us where she's going to introduce some really key topics and ideas for facilitating and resolving conflict in a virtual environment. So Janice, over to you.
Hi, my name's Janice McNamara. And I got interested in facilitation when I worked in Namibia for 3 years. It was a fascinating job supporting museum development in a country that was newly independent, and it was still scarred by apartheid and the struggle for independence. There were very strong held views and tensions, and my role was to smooth the path and enable safe spaces for individuals to be able to speak and to be heard. Because museums are about telling stories, and whose stories and how those stories are going to be told. So on my return to the UK, I established a career all around facilitation, from one-to-one mediation through to teams, through broader consultation work, and then COVID arrived. So what I want to do in this brief recording is to talk a little bit about effective virtual facilitation skills and how to resolve conflict remotely. And initially, I've just had a quick look at CIPD's research, Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, about the impact of COVID on people working from home. And they were saying there's 47% of reduced mental well-being and 20% of lack of motivation and engagement. So in reality, the individuals we're working with are going through a tough time, and therefore our facilitation needs to be sensitive to that. We all know it on a personal level, but we need to think about how we adapt to ensure that we really embrace and support individuals through the process. So what is the impact for our facilitation and managing conflict virtually? I expected there to be a really significant difference. However, I found that the principles and the values that we use in our facilitation is the same face-to-face and virtually. Also, the truth is that when we're facilitating, we're bringing together different viewpoints, and we still want to enable those voices to be heard and to draw on the diversity of our stakeholders. So as a facilitator, in a way, working virtually, we have the responsibility to be creative and to really engage with the amazing opportunities of working with the different functionality of the different platforms we work with. So what do we need to consider? Firstly, planning and prep, I think, is massive in terms of facilitation. And there's some key questions. What do we need to facilitate and why? What's the purpose and the principles and the vision for that facilitation? And what level are we working at? Are we simply consulting? Are we deciding together? Are we acting together? Or in truth, are we simply informing them of information? It's amazing how the functionality can really work. For many of you, you may have been working virtually for a long time with global teams. And I think what's fascinating is how we can draw on the versatility of the platforms to make the most of that. So I was working with a team this week who are a global team. I didn't know what the dynamic was within the group. And I just did a simple exercise of putting a world map on the screen and pre-prepared post-its of people's names, got them to locate themselves, got them to draw on where their teams are and to highlight some of the issues they were facing. So I knew what I was dealing with a little bit more, and also they'd been introduced to the technology, so they found it easier when we were doing more deeper stuff later on. So the people and dynamics, what's the power group in the, what's the power base in the group? What's the impact of that? If we've got a small group of stakeholders, I highly recommend having a 10 or 20-minute conversation with them beforehand so that we know what's going on. Also, you know, we talk about planning for meetings in terms of what we're going to do. I think it's really important to consider how we're going to work. And, you know, you might have a working agreement or a ground rules, but they're often seen as wallpaper. People are not taking them that seriously, whereas I do. I think setting the ground rules at the start of the meeting in terms of behaviours is massive, because then it's so much easier for us and the team to call that out if people are not working within them, and have all made an agreement to abide to them at the start. Also, with a group of small groups, it's easy to call people by name, and we can mute them, you know, so we can make sure that there's a fair distribution and contribution. Also, I think it's important working virtually so that we can read what's happening in terms of people's responses, to have some protocols. We want the cameras on, we want to position themselves well in the camera so that we can see them. And also we may want to send them information in advance so that they're clear about what the expectations are of them. And then managing conflict. Inevitably, facilitation is called upon to enable change. And if there is change, to me, there's very often conflict. We may be asked as a facilitator to resolve conflict, which I could read as a code for we want everyone to think this, in which case it's not really a facilitation. And we need to be honest that if we really do want the contribution of others, they may contradict each other. So the ground rules are useful because we're outlining the behaviours that we want within the room. But actually, the facilitator needs to feel at ease with conflict and to feel comfortable to bring out the dialogue that will share those different viewpoints, because there can be a whole range of different reasons for that. There's conflict, and just a few examples, you know, it could be around different needs, miscommunication, different interpretation. There could even be some old wounds, and also people are vulnerable because of COVID, and it may be that they're being defensive and not really wanting to face change. So it may feel uncomfortable. However, we need to stay in that space where we are respectful and we're not non-judgmental, and we create the space for individuals to contribute. So a few takeaways. I would say spend more time planning your facilitation, make the most of the functionality. And if you can, give time to have one-to-one, very brief conversations with people. We need to call on the simple principles and techniques of the facilitator, and to work with conflict on the screen in the same way that we would in a room. And remember, there is no problem stakeholder. As behind every problem, there's a challenge, and that challenge is often a wish that they have. And we have a responsibility to find out what that wish is so it becomes explicit, and then we can manage it. Okay, I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Bye.
Yes, well, as those of you who are live will see, somebody managed to find a festive hat for me to wear, viewer. Well, thanks, Christy. It was a good idea. I'm joking, of course. It's the festive. It's Christmas, as someone once said in the 70s in a song that will be repeated forevermore. So I suppose I will be finishing this episode in this very fetching hat. And well, who knows? Perhaps it will become a permanent fixture. I can tell you now, it absolutely will not. Thank you, Janice, for fantastic, really, really useful insight there. I think what Janice was saying there about facilitation was so very, very important. And as I was listening, I was thinking there was a lot of synergy between what Janice was saying and what Elle was saying, because Janice was talking about, you know, people potentially having been through a tough time. And we need to be a little bit forgiving. We need to really, you know, have that level of empathy. And I also loved what Janice was saying about ensuring voices are being heard. We need to build diversity by default into what we do. And for those of you that know me or have watched any of these previous episodes will know that diversity and inclusion and involvement and participation are themes that are very, very close to my heart. And I love what Janice said about being aware of power dynamics. And, you know, are we really looking to resolve conflict, or is it, you know, are we being asked to steamroller something through? So thank you so much, Janice, for putting that together. Again, if you liked what Janice had to say, which I'm sure you will, if you are logged in via Zoom, you will get an email after the event. You'll have a link to Janice on LinkedIn, so you can connect with her. And I definitely recommend you do that. Very, very inspirational person is Janice, so do stay in touch with her as well. Okay, so just before we close, I'm sorry, I can't, no, I'm being told I must leave the hat on. It is the last episode of the season. It would be rude not to. So just a couple of things to mention before we go. First of all, do remember that competition. Get active on social media, use the BA Fringe hashtag, also tag our sponsors, our friends at Skore, with your biggest takeaway, perhaps a photo of you enjoying the show, not a photo of you with me with this hat on though, so that wouldn't be a good look, would it? And share it on LinkedIn with that hashtag, and you are in with a chance of winning a 5-user license for 3 months of Skore's process modeling and management tool, which, you know, in these virtual facilitation environments that we find ourselves in, will be a very, very useful thing, and you'll be very popular amongst your colleagues for having 5 licenses to distribute around. Also, Skore have an event coming up in February called Scrum. That's Scrum with a K, which is a networking event for change and transformation professionals. So, you know, spread the net a bit wider. You're already attending Black Metric events. You're probably attending BA Fringe and our other website webinars and so on. Why not check out some of Skore's stuff as well? So do check that out. You can see the URL on the screen below me here. So all that's left for me to say is a massive thank you to everyone who has spoken or been interviewed on this episode. This really, you know, the BA Fringe really is about the speakers. It couldn't really happen without the speakers. And do keep in mind, if you want to be on BA Fringe, like, it's not hard there's not a massive barrier. You don't need to be a so-called professional speaker. This is a platform for practitioners. So if you have something interesting to say, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. It can be, you know, a 7-minute segment, a 12-minute segment. We can have a chat about what would work for you. A massive thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in, whether you're live or whether you're watching the recording. Again, BA Fringe wouldn't be BA Fringe without you. Do keep in mind that the BA Fringe does sell out virtually every episode. So what my producer Matt is going to do now is he's going to put a link to January's BA Fringe in the Zoom chat. So you can reserve your seat now. It's going to be on the 14th of January, so 1 month from now. The agenda's still being pinned down, so I don't know exactly what's happening and in what order, but register now because we'll bring you a whole bunch of interesting stuff. Also, of course, a massive thank you to our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Skore. Please do check out the sponsors of BA Fringe. BA Fringe can only really happen with the support of sponsorship. If I tell you a little bit of a secret, right? Every hour's worth of content that we broadcast live takes between 20 and 30 hours of effort to get prepared and up and running and so on. So the sponsorship is a really important part of it. And that's how we can make it and make it free for everyone in the community. So mark your diary for the 14th of January. Hope to see you there. I'd also like to thank everyone involved in the production, particularly Matt, my long-suffering producer of the BA Fringe, amongst many other things, who's just been fantastic and even found me this very fetching hat to wear. And on that note, we will end this episode of BA Fringe. If you celebrate it, then season's greetings. But even if you don't, have a fantastic end of year. And we will see you on the 14th of January for season 2 of BA Fringe. Bye for now.
Yeah.